The relentless pursuit of truth is one of the defining characteristics of humanity. It's an instinct we all share, even in the face of uncertainty, even when the answers seem distant or beyond reach. This instinct drives us to search for what is hidden, to seek out the reasons behind what has happened, and to uncover the mysteries that shape the course of our lives. In the case of Lieutenant Colonel Joseph C. McConnell, one of America's greatest jet aces who vanished in 1952, this drive to uncover the truth did not diminish with time. It remained steadfast for over 70 years, pushing people to continue searching for answers, even when it seemed like they had long since been lost to history. When McConnell's F-86 Sabre went missing during the Korean War, the circumstances surrounding his disappearance became one of the most enduring mysteries of the conflict. The Korean War was a time of intense global tension, filled with secrecy, covert operations, and military maneuvers shrouded in the fog of Cold War politics. The sudden disappearance of one of America's top pilots was not just a tragic event. It was an unsettling mystery that hung in the air for decades. The loss of McConnell, whose skill and courage had made him an admired figure, was not only felt by his family but also by the nation and the Air Force. He represented the very best of what America stood for, and his disappearance left a void in the hearts of many. At first, the disappearance seemed like a tragic but not altogether unusual event in wartime. Thousands of soldiers were lost during the war, and many never returned home. Aircraft went down in hostile territories, pilots were lost in dogfights, and bodies were never recovered. The fog of war often obscured the fates of soldiers, leaving families to wonder, year after year, what had happened to their loved ones. But McConnell's case was different. He was more than just another casualty of war. He was a symbol of American excellence in the skies, someone whose skills had earned him the title of top jet ace of the Korean War. The uncertainty surrounding his fate was more than just an unsolved case. It was a wound that lingered, unanswered and unresolved. Over the years, various attempts were made to find McConnell's wreckage, but all efforts proved futile. The terrain of North Korea, rugged and inaccessible, made it incredibly difficult to locate anything, especially an aircraft that had crashed decades earlier. Political tensions during the Cold War further complicated the search, as the United States and North Korea were locked in a bitter ideological and military standoff. The region was heavily militarized and access was limited. The lack of cooperation from North Korea in recovering remains or providing information about missing American servicemen meant that answers were elusive. The United States military, along with McConnell's family, never gave up hope. The search was a long and arduous one, but it never ceased. For years, the military conducted operations to locate missing pilots and recover their remains. These operations, however, were only able to recover a fraction of the thousands of soldiers whose fates remained unknown. In McConnell's case, the search was complicated by the political climate of the time, as well as the difficult geographical conditions of the region where his plane had gone down. The long wait for answers began to feel like an indelible part of McConnell's story, an ongoing reminder of the sacrifices made by those who fought in the war. But no one gave up entirely, even as the decades passed. The relentless pursuit of truth in McConnell's case wasn't just about finding the wreckage, it was about something deeper. It was about the desire for closure, the need to answer the questions that had lingered for so long. The search for McConnell's plane was a search for meaning, for a final resolution that could give his family and the nation the peace they had been denied. In many ways, this search became symbolic of the broader desire for resolution that many families of missing soldiers felt during the Korean War. Their loved ones had disappeared without a trace, and the need to understand what happened was a constant burden that carried emotional weight for decades. Then, in 2024, an astonishing breakthrough occurred. A team of American and South Korean researchers working with North Korean authorities discovered the wreckage of McConnell's F-86 Sabre deep in the mountains of North Korea. The aircraft had been buried under layers of earth and rubble, hidden from view for all these years. The discovery was a turning point in the story, one that provided the answers to the long unsolved mystery. McConnell's remains were found alongside the wreckage of his plane, and DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to McConnell. Finally, after 72 years, the search had borne fruit. The truth had been uncovered, but only after a monumental effort, fueled by a collective determination to find it. What does this discovery tell us about the pursuit of truth? First and foremost, it shows that the quest for answers is never truly abandoned, no matter how long the search takes. The determination of those who continued to search for McConnell's remains, military personnel, historians, and volunteers, demonstrates a profound commitment to uncovering the truth, even in the face of enormous obstacles. This search was not about gaining fame or recognition. It was about honoring a promise to bring closure to a story that had remained unfinished. The search for McConnell's remains was about more than solving a historical puzzle. It was about doing right by those who served and sacrificed, and ensuring that their stories were told, even if it took decades. The relentless pursuit of truth also speaks to the human need for closure. For the McConnell family, the news that their father's remains had been found must have been both a relief and an emotional reckoning. The absence of definitive answers for over 7 decades left a hole in their lives, a void that could only be filled by the truth. For the nation, McConnell's recovery provided a sense of closure for a story that had become part of the broader narrative of the Korean War. It offered a sense of resolution to a long-standing mystery, allowing people to reflect on the sacrifices made by soldiers like McConnell, whose courage and skill were never in question, but whose fate had been unknown. The pursuit of truth in McConnell's case also highlights the role of technology and innovation in uncovering the past. Modern tools, from advanced DNA testing to satellite imaging and aerial surveys, played a crucial role in the discovery of the wreckage. Without these technological advancements, it's unlikely that the wreckage would have been found, and the truth would have remained buried. The ability to track down the wreckage of a plane that crashed 72 years ago is a testament to the ways in which human ingenuity has allowed us to solve problems that once seemed insurmountable. The search for McConnell's remains demonstrates the power of persistence and technology in uncovering long-lost truths, no matter how deeply they are hidden. The story of McConnell's recovery is also a reminder of the importance of not giving up on the truth, even when the search feels hopeless. It shows us that sometimes the answers we seek are just beyond the horizon, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. And while it took many years, the persistence of those who refused to let the mystery remain unsolved made all the difference. McConnell's story, and the discovery of his wreckage and remains, will now be a chapter in history that can finally be closed, providing a sense of completion and honoring the sacrifice of a man who gave everything for his country. The relentless pursuit of truth, even over the span of decades, has shown us that no story is ever truly finished, and no mystery is ever truly unsolvable. The significance of closure cannot be overstated, particularly when it comes to the recovery of fallen soldiers, missing persons, and those whose stories are left unfinished. Closure is not simply a matter of resolving a mystery. It is the emotional and psychological process that allows individuals, families, and communities to begin healing after experiencing trauma, loss, or uncertainty. For decades, the disappearance of Lieutenant Colonel Joseph C. McConnell, the top jet ace of the Korean War, was a wound that never fully healed. His family, colleagues, and the nation as a whole carried the weight of not knowing what had happened to him. The recovery of McConnell's remains, 72 years after his plane went down, brings a sense of finality to a long-held grief, allowing the pieces of his story to come together in a way that brings peace to those who have lived with the pain of uncertainty. For the McConnell family, this moment of closure must have been profound. The emotional toll of having a loved one missing for decades is immeasurable. The unanswered questions: was he alive when the plane went down? How did he meet his end? What had happened in the final moments of his life? Are questions that gnaw at the soul, particularly when there are no definitive answers. Families of missing soldiers are often left in a kind of limbo, never fully able to grieve or let go because the finality of death has not been confirmed. They are stuck in a state of waiting, holding on to the hope that one day they will have the answers they deserve. The discovery of McConnell's remains allowed his family to finally mourn his loss fully, and to bury him with the respect and dignity he deserved, something that had eluded them for more than 70 years. The recovery of McConnell's remains represents more than just a personal victory for his family. It is a form of collective healing for the larger military community and for the nation as a whole. McConnell, as a decorated ace with a remarkable record of aerial victories, was not just a pilot. He was an emblem of the American military spirit during the Korean War. His name was known across the ranks, and his disappearance was felt by many who served alongside him. The long-standing uncertainty surrounding his fate created a void that echoed through the military community, especially for those who had fought beside him and looked up to him as a role model. His peers, too, were left with questions that could not be answered, and they, too, felt the absence of knowing what had happened to him. In many ways, McConnell's recovery is a symbolic act of closure for them as well, a final chapter to a story that had remained unresolved. The sense of closure is also deeply connected to the broader cultural and national context of how war and sacrifice are remembered. Soldiers who serve in foreign conflicts often do so knowing that they may not return. However, the idea of going missing in action, MIA, is a particularly painful one, as it creates an absence that cannot be filled. The United States has long held a commitment to recovering and identifying the remains of its fallen soldiers, as exemplified by the efforts of organizations like the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA. The DPAA and similar organizations exist to provide answers for the families of soldiers who were lost in wars, and their work represents a profound commitment to honoring those who gave their lives in service to their country. For the nation, the discovery of McConnell's remains reaffirms this commitment, providing a tangible reminder that even the longest of waiting periods can eventually come to an end. This process allows the American public to reflect on the human costs of war, not just in terms of combatants, but in terms of the families who are left behind. The recovery of McConnell's remains serves as a reminder that the nation does not forget its fallen heroes, even when they have been missing for generations. The emotional significance of closure extends beyond the families of those directly affected. For the country as a whole, closure represents the opportunity to honor the sacrifice of the individual and recognize the collective efforts that went into finding answers. This process becomes a part of the nation's historical narrative, allowing the public to reflect on the broader impact of conflict and the toll it takes on everyone involved, from the soldiers on the front lines to the loved ones they leave behind. The recovery of McConnell's remains allows the country to pay its respects to a hero who gave everything, and it affirms the idea that every soldier's story matters, even if that story takes decades to tell. In a way, this closure becomes a collective moment of mourning, one in which the entire nation acknowledges the sacrifice that McConnell made for his country and the pain that his absence caused. Another aspect of closure is the way it provides an opportunity for reflection and reconciliation with the past. The discovery of McConnell's remains prompts us to reflect not only on his life and sacrifice, but also on the larger issues of war, loss, and memory. The Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War, does not always receive the recognition it deserves in American history. Yet for the families of those who fought and died in that conflict, the war was anything but forgotten. The recovery of McConnell's remains shines a light on the often overlooked narratives of those who served in Korea and their families who have spent years waiting for answers. For many, this moment of closure provides an opportunity to bring the Korean War back into the national conversation, allowing a new generation to understand the costs of that war and to recognize the heroes who served in it. The recovery also underscores the importance of the continuing efforts to account for missing soldiers from all wars. The discovery of McConnell's wreckage and remains is part of a larger, ongoing process in which the remains of soldiers who died in foreign conflicts are sought, identified, and brought home. The emotional and psychological toll on the families of missing soldiers is something that lingers for years, sometimes for generations. The promise of recovery, the hope that one day the truth will be revealed, is a thread that runs through the lives of these families. For them, the moment of closure is not just a personal one, but a collective one that reaffirms the nation's commitment to honoring its fallen. Complexities surrounding the Korean War. The geopolitical tensions between the United States and North Korea, combined with the difficult terrain and harsh climate of the region, made it almost impossible to recover his remains for decades. But despite these challenges, the pursuit of closure never stopped. This speaks to the resilience of the human spirit and the deep commitment of those involved in the recovery process. The families of missing soldiers, as well as the agencies working to bring their loved ones home, never give up hope. Even when the journey to closure is long and fraught with obstacles. The significance of closure is not only in finding the answers, but in the emotional release that follows. When McConnell's remains were finally recovered, it was not just a physical act of returning his body to his family. It was a release from the uncertainty, the questions, and the pain that had built up over the years. The sense of knowing what happened, of having a definitive answer, allows those left behind to begin the difficult process of healing. It provides the space to mourn, to remember, and to celebrate the life of the person who was lost. For the McConnell family, the long wait for closure is finally over, and they can now lay their beloved father, brother, and husband to rest with the dignity and respect he deserves. Ultimately, closure allows people to reconcile with the past, to heal from the wounds that have been carried for so long, and to find peace in knowing that even after decades, the truth can still be uncovered.